Legend of Zelda, frequently considered to be one of the best, if not the best game series of all time. It's been on every Nintendo console known to man. Well, except for the Virtual Boy, thank God. And today we are going to start a marathon dedicated to 25 years of Zelda greatness. Now I know this is a bit late, but hey, why can't 2012 have a bit of Zelda love too? As well as the Mario series, the Zelda series will become a Nintendo icon for generations yet to come. And in this video, we're going to look at the game that started it all off on the NES. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my Zeldathon. Now, to be perfectly honest, I was never really a Zelda fan until about 6 years ago. Before then, I didn't know anything about it except for the title. Technically, the first game I played was the Link to the Past remake on the Game Boy Advance back somewhere in 2003 or 4. But at this age, I was so used to playing linear platforming games, so this one caught me completely off guard. Because of that, I put this game down minutes after playing because I got so confused. Hey, give me a break, I was 8. Ever since then, I have been seeing titles and titles of Zelda games coming out to sales, and still not knowing what exactly you do or what it was about. I didn't even bother trying any of them, and that was not just because I didn't have a GameCube at the time. But then, a few years later, my dad introduced me to Ocarina of Time. Oh my god, I could not believe I was missing out on so much. This game kept me entertained for hours and hours, and it still does to this day. But this is another game for another time. So after having so much fun with Ocarina of Time, I decided to go back and try out some of the other Zelda games, and one of them was the original NES Classic that's often considered to be one of the greatest NES games ever made. Here we are at the title screen. Waiting a little longer will give you a brief English summary of your goal. You play as a little elf kid named Link, who lives on the land of Hyrule, and it's his job to restore an ancient artifact known as the Triforce. Legend has it that whoever puts all the pieces of the Triforce together, they will forever rule Hyrule. But the Triforce has been split into 3, and each of the pieces are in the clutches of Link, Princess Zelda, and the evil Ganon. Link holding the Triforce of Courage, Zelda holding the Triforce of Wisdom, and Ganon holding the Triforce of Power. Ganon and his minions one day attacked the village of Hyrule and captured Princess Zelda along with the Triforce of Wisdom. But Zelda shattered it into 8 fragments and are now hidden throughout Hyrule, and it's up to Link to recover all the pieces of the Triforce and to defeat the villainous Ganon. As for the gameplay, immediately when you start the game, you're dropped off on the first screen with only a tiny little shield that you can't attack with. But soon enough, and by that I mean very soon, you'll get to your first sword to stab your enemies with. Throughout the game, you'll come across 2 other swords that'll make you stronger between each one. Based on the adventures of former Nintendo leader Shigeru Miyamoto as a child, Zelda involves you having to explore around Hyrule looking for treasure and other things that can help you in your adventure. If you search hard enough, you'll be able to scavenge around different dungeons which hold one of the pieces of the Triforce, guarded by that dungeon's boss. Each dungeon also has hidden weapons and items that'll boost up Link's arsenal. First we have the bow, and yes, I said bow because unfortunately you'll have to buy the arrows. Next we have the boomerang and the magical boomerang. Both of them have the same function of paralyzing most enemies the second they come into contact with them. The difference between each of the boomerangs is that the magical boomerang is able to go farther than the normal one. There are also bombs which can damage enemies the instant it explodes and is able to blow up holes in the walls to reveal secret passageways and little rooms. Then there's the raft, which really only has the purpose of swimming past 2 docks. Why exactly I can't use the raft to swim across the ocean is far beyond me. Next is the ladder, which allows you to walk across 1 square of water, which is definitely helpful if you want to get through little gaps. Although why Link can't just jump across the gap, I don't understand. Oh, come on. See, look at this. Wouldn't this be a good time to use the raft? That would finish Link's quest off so much faster. Anyway, there's also the blue and red candle, which can burn bushes to find hidden goodies and can illuminate a dark room in the dungeons as well as burn enemies. The difference between the candles is that the blue one can strike 1 light per screen, whereas the red one can shoot as many as you want. Next is the flute, which is basically Link's mode of transportation and is essential to beat the Dig Dogger. And finally there's the magic wand, which allows you to chuck a deadly magic spell onto enemies, wiping them out. You can also find the spellbook, which enables the wand to produce fire after the spell has been cast. So with all those weapons, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Link certainly looks well equipped for this adventure, this game is probably a breeze! You'd be dead wrong. To put it bluntly, Legend of Zelda is hard. Bloody hard. I wouldn't say this is one of the hardest games I've ever played, but it comes close. And it's certainly one of the hardest Zelda games ever made. The main reason why this game is so difficult is the enemies. Their damage output is intoxicating, especially the blue versions of some enemies, which take more hits to kill. Luckily, to make your journey a little easier, you're able to buy the blue ring, which reduces the damage you take by half, and very late in the game, you're also able to get the red ring, which has better defense than the blue ring. The enemies that piss most people off, including me, are the Wizzrobes and the Darknuts. Wizzrobes constantly teleport and move around, which make it a bit hard to hit them, and when you're in their line of sight, they'll throw a spell at you which will take out a chunk of your health. The Darknuts are certainly no pushover either, mainly because you can't attack them from the front, and their movement pattern is completely unpredictable. Especially when you think you're able to stab the guy, but at the last second they'll decide to be a douchebag and turn towards you. Now the Darknuts and the Wizzrobes, to put it simply, can burn in hell! Seriously, was there any reason as to why they had to add these enemies in? This is Castlevania 3 standards, and trust me, that is saying a lot. Do they not even look at this game and think to themselves, you know what, I think these enemies might be a little too difficult for young children. Just why? Why in the name of God would you even consider adding these guys in? The difficulty spike is just staggering. And to top it all off, if you die and choose the continue option, then you would start from the beginning of the dungeon with only 3 hearts. 3 hearts! So if you want to survive, I would recommend traveling to the nearest fairy lake for her to refill all of your health. Or if you're incredibly lucky, keep stabbing enemies until you get a random fairy to pop up and refill only a fraction of your health. When you see these fairies, make sure to pick them up. They will save your life. In fact, the hardest parts in the entire game are some of the rooms in level 8. You have a barrage of blue Darknuts which will take 2 hits with your strongest sword. But you also have these tombstones spitting fireballs at you at every angle, so be prepared to die a lot. Anyway, scattered throughout the dungeons are small keys which will enable you to open locked doors. Now for some reason the door eats the key and unallows you to get it back, which is why it is useful later in the game to get the magical key, which basically gives you an unlimited amount of small keys. Now in the overworld you aren't given a map as such, but rather a small square inside a large dull looking box. However, in the dungeons when you find a map, it's actually a full map, and obtaining one in each dungeon shows you what shape it represents. An eagle, a moon, a snake, a lizard, a dragon, a demon, a lion, a skull, and a swastika. And you can also collect a compass for each map to show you where on the map the Triforce piece is. Finally, at the end of each dungeon, you'll come across different bosses. There's Aquamentus, Dodongo, Manhandla, Gleeok, Digdogger, and Goma. Each of the bosses, unfortunately, are piss easy. Hell, I wouldn't even consider them as bosses. Well, except for the Gleeok. That guy can be pretty brutal. Especially with the fact that each time you meet him, he'll have one more head than before. But by defeating each boss, you'll obtain a heart container that increases your health and you'll be able to obtain a piece of the Triforce. As you explore through Hyrule, you can speak to the villagers for some advice on how to advance further into finding the dungeons and hidden secrets. While some of them can be pretty helpful, other times they'll just spill out things that's not even relevant. But I absolutely love stabbing the old man in some of the dungeons. Some of the villagers also own a shop which you can use your rupees to buy an item that's available. Although why anyone would want to buy a small key is beyond me. Unfortunately though, a lot of the items are ridiculously expensive, and if I may be honest, probably about as bad as Castlevania 2. But overall, unlike Simon's Quest, the villagers are a lot more helpful. But sadly, the problems don't stop there. Even with what I've just said in mind, there are still some essential stuff in this game that you wouldn't even think of doing. You've got to burn a specific bush, use the flute on a lake, and bomb a specific rock in order to advance through your adventure. This was probably a good time to buy copies of Nintendo Power, because I don't think anybody could have figured this stuff out on their own. The same goes for the dungeons, because there are also some specific walls that even with the map you wouldn't even consider blowing up. Anyway, upon collecting all pieces of the Triforce, we're finally able to pass through Gannons Layer to finish him off. This is undoubtedly the biggest dungeon in the game, and trust me, you're going to get lost quite a few times, because what I forgot to mention is that in some of the dungeons there's an underground tunnel you can take which leads you to another portion of that dungeon that you couldn't get to normally. However, in Gannons Layer, there are so many of these things you'll just be bouncing all over the place. Now before you go off to fight Ganon, you'll need to obtain the silver arrows. This is what kills him. If you don't get these arrows, then you're screwed. This goes especially to you first timers out there. But getting further into the dungeon, we can finally see what Ganon is. So the land of Hyrule was afraid of pork. Who knew? The fight with Ganon is actually pretty easy, even though throughout the entire battle he's invisible unless you hit him. But when Ganon turns red and you use the silver arrow, the beast has been defeated, letting you obtain the Triforce of Power. And by going inside the next room, we have now saved Princess Zelda. Zelda thanks you, the very brief credits roll, and the game offers you a second quest. And what is this second quest, you may be asking? Well, to put it simply, the second quest! Jesus Christ, I have never seen anything so awfully cryptic in my life! What's basically different from the first quest is that it's the same overall map, but the dungeons are in different places and shapes. Now you may at first be thinking, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. Well, you may be right, but those people who play the game know what I'm talking about. I mean, look at this! How does that work? Did Nintendo honestly think we were able to figure that out? Even the brightest of people wouldn't know to do that. Why, oh why did they think that everybody would know to just simply walk through the wall? It does not add up. How could they possibly make a game so disgustingly cryptic? It's worse than Castlevania 2. Yes, I know that's the second time I've brought that game up, but still, it's true. But anyway, back in the day, what made this game different from other NES games at that time was that it contained a battery pack, so that when you die, you have the option to save under your name. And that way, when you would want to come back and play the game later, you would be able to continue where you left off. And that is actually pretty damn cool for an NES game. The Legend of Zelda, even with all those problems, can still be quite a fun game. Despite some limitations from the NES and moments from the game that are just all around impossible to easily spot, Zelda as a game itself is really an experiment to try something different from linear platforming. Ever since this game came out, the Zelda franchise has been on everything. Toys, candy, comics, and even got its own cereal with Mario. And let's not forget probably the cheesiest Nintendo commercial ever made.
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Octoroks, Tektites, Levers too. But with your help, our hero pulls through. Yeah, go Link, yeah, get Zelda. Awesome! Oh, for God's sake.
So overall, this is certainly a decent start to one of the greatest gaming series of all time. And that is why I'm going to give this game a 7.5 out of 10. Standing for good for its time and has aged well. The next game we're going to look at is Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. I'm Josh Smith from Reviews Yesteryear. Take care.